Are you tired of the same boring positions? Do you seem to always get punished for playing aggressively? I've got a solution just for you, the Scotch Gambit. It is really similar to the Italian, you just need to add a d4 move before moving out the bishop. And voila! You enter a wonderful crossing with 6 passes, and all of them lead you to victory. My stats show 74% win rate with Scotch Gambit in rated rapid games. And it is tough to pick out a bad continuation. First things first, I'm gonna show you the most common trap in the opening. It comes against 4 bishop c5. This is the Guioco Piano move in the Italian, and I had a lot of trouble against it until I started playing the Scotch Gambit. Here we play c3, attacking the center, trying to take the full center with the pawn, and most of the people will just take this pawn, and here's the trap basically, they just fallen for it. We play bishop takes f7, and after they take, we have the queen fork right in the middle. After king e8, we go queen h5 for style points, g6 is also a weakening move that they can play, and we take the bishop, d6, take the pawn, queen f6, don't trade queens, we're not up material, queen b3, and from here you will have a great attacking game. Their king is stuck in the center, it can't castle, remember that, everything will be nice for you. Let's go back to our trap. When we take the pawn with the check, they can decline this bishop and go king f8, but it is even worse for them. We just go back, and this bishop now covers this important square near the king, and cb may continue. We just take the pawn, knight f6, e5, queen e7, pins the pawn to the king, castles, knight g4, we just develop, attack the queen, and just look at this position. Like the pawn x-rays the queen, our queen is ready to come into attack. This knight threatens this nasty fork. This bishop is really strong, protects the knight. Queen e1 may continue. Oh, this is just really winning for white. But what happens? Let's go back to the Scotch Gambit position. I play bishop c5. What happens if they don't take the pawn on c3? Like, for example, they play knight f6. On knight f6 we almost always answer e5, attack the knight, and if they go to g4, then we just take the pawn. This protects this pawn, attacks the bishop, really good position. If they move their knight to e4, then bishop d5. This is an important move when you're not castled. Then you should prevent the d5 move by moving your bishop there. This attacks the knight. If they find this, they can play knight takes f2. You take, and here's a discovered check. But you shouldn't worry, you can even play king g3. This is the best move in the position, and you have a great position from here. They can also try counter-attacking, and this is almost always one of the best moves for black. Here just bishop b5, knight can jump into the center, you take the pawn, check, cover the check. This is a pretty equal position. That's great because Scotch Gambit isn't losing by any means. Protecting the pawn with the queen is also a bad move because we can play e5 here. If they take the pawn with the knight, queen e2 pins the knight to the king. Just remember, if they play d5, to go back and not let them win tempo on your bishop with knight e7. In this position you have this move, you are winning the knight, it's great for you, this is an easy game. Bishop to e7 is almost like a death sentence to yourself. Black is giving us back the pawn, but that's not why we came here. We play c3. Basically against any of the bishop moves we play c3. dc and queen d5. We already threatened checkmate in 1. That's pretty easy to see, so they should play knight h6. If they don't, that's just mate in 2. I hope you saw that. So knight to h6. We take the knight with our bishop, and here the only move basically is castling. We take the pawn. I recommend this move. Bishop to c1 is not possible because of knight to b4. We'll get to knight to b4 later. So we play knight c3. If black takes the bishop, we go queen to h5, already attacking the pawn, placing our queen near the enemy king. So already an attack is brewing, you can smell it in the air. Bishop g5 defends the pawn, we have h4. Bishop goes back, we take the pawn, bishop attacks our queen, we can return to h5, we should stay near the enemy king. And here a quiet move like d6 can already lose the game, because we have knight to g5, threatening checkmate again. Something like h6 and the simplest move and it looks really pretty is queen to g6. If you look carefully you see that the pawn is pinned, so there's no danger to our queen. And a move like h takes g5 just runs into pawn takes g5 and we have an unstoppable checkmate on h7. Bishop 5 just take with the queen. If rook comes here, just we can mate even here. So that's black playing perfectly until some point, and he still gets mated on move 17. But we need to talk about knight to b4. I told you that knight c3 is good against knight to b4, but how exactly? How do we deal with this nasty move? We go queen to h5, completely sacking the rook. Knight c2 check. We go king f1. This is stockfish move, although other moves are quite good as well. And why is it so good? Because we have h4. The logic of this move is pretty simple. We want to sacrifice our bishop. Let's say black plays d6, we sack our bishop, and we play knight to g5, and if they take the knight, h takes, and that's, you've already seen that. The queen teams up with the rook and delivers a checkmate. If they take our bishop, that is even simpler, that's already forced checkmate. Just take the pawn and the same ideas apply. These lines are beautiful, I hope you'll see a lot of bishop e7s in your games. One of the most popular variations of the Scotch Gambit is this h6 one, and when you see it, you can basically already tell that they don't know any theory. Here you just can castle, and that's like the Scotch Gambit, but you already castled, so that's amazing. And most likely bishop c5 will follow, and you know the gist, c3, they will take, and the same thing applies. Here you don't get any style points for the second check, so you just take the bishop. And after d6 there are two moves that win for white. There is a queen c4 move and queen h5. For queen h5 you need to study some theory. There's this knight h4, knight g6 line, and then your queen, like, it's hard. So just play queen c4, we reserve this pawn for the taking for our knight. Our queen is nicely positioned in the center, and it is pretty easy to win in this position, so something like this can happen, like knight f6, takes, and they just blunder a fork or something. It'll be easy to convert the advantage here, I promise. Another example would be like c takes b2 here. Here bishop takes. Just develop your pieces, and they may forget about this b2 bishop and blunder something like this. Bishop protects the rook and it secures the queen to the king. It's winning. So, what happens if they don't play bishop to c5? And for example, they develop the knight. Here, the same thing, push e5. If g4, then h3, and rook e1 skewers the knight, you pick up a piece. This is pretty easy stuff. If here knight not to g4 but to e4, then rook e1, not bishop d5, because we are already castled and we have the rook e1 move. That's a nice notice. Then something like this can happen, and if they castle short, then your queen and your bishop may form a battery and perform a nice attack, or just knight d5, knight f6. This sacrifice is strong a lot of times. Other popular variation is, we're back again at this position, the third one, the knight to h7. It is one of the best continuation of these positions, so just take the pawn and develop your pieces. Here the same logic applies, the kingside attack will bring you a lot of victories. If on move 5 you see a d6 move, then it's basically like the fiddler defense. So something like this can happen. And here there's this nasty e5 move, because you have this bishop f7 check. If they take, then the queen falls, so I'll show you this. But if they're not dumb, like king e7, queen c4, the position is extremely hard to play for the black side. Who would want to be in this position? Not me. White's plans are simple as a rock. Bruh.
Full Metal Alchemist.
Another really popular move for black here is bishop before check. Here we just cover and castle. And we get kind of a Danish gambit, but better. We have a really aggressive opening, especially if they take the third pawn. We're currently down 2 pawns, but we have these monster bishops. We have some pieces developed, king castled, so it's unclear who's better, but Stockfish says that white is. So, the most popular move here is knight f6, obviously, because they need to defend this pawn somehow. Knight f6. Of course, knight f6, we push e5. That's across all the variations. Knight g4, h3, all the same. And here, knight h6 is the most popular one. Here we have an interesting plan. We go knight c3, castles, and knight d5. They go back, for example. And here, the strongest move by Stockfish is knight to f6 check. That's impressive. And gf, ef, and we have this monster pawn supported by this bishop. It covers these squares near the king. The position is really good for white. We have knight g5, queen h4, maybe we have rook e1, rook can go there. But I'm kinda scared to recommend this line, so if you don't feel like playing it, here we have queen c2. This move points at the enemy king, connects the rooks, and it is one move closer to putting our queen on c3, where it can team up with the bishop and maybe deliver a checkmate. For example, the game can follow as this: d6, takes, queen c3, f6. We can just take this, it's a double check with the knight. King has to go to h8, knight h5. It threatens checkmate on g7. Queen d7 certainly doesn't stop this. Just queen takes, bishop takes, and that's checkmate. If we get back a little bit, like to this position, let's move 11. If they don't want to preserve the bishop and they go like d6, we take the bishop, of course, takes, and now queen b3. Queen b3 team ups with the bishop, and it also wants to go to c3 to deliver this checkmate. We also have our rooks going to d1 and e1, and the idea of queen c3 also works really nice against black's queen here, because it can't defend both checkmate and this knight at the same time. And if they want to defend with their knight on f5, we can just kick it out with g5 and the battery stays alive. So that's it for knight to h6, but if they go knight takes the pawn here, it's real easy. We have two attackers, just knight takes. That's easy. If black's knight doesn't go to g4 in the first place and goes to e4, We don't go bishop d5, knight has an escape square here. Here we go a3, something like bishop c5 and queen d5. This is just a fork. Queen hits the knight, the bishop, the mate. If they just castle, we can take the knight, and something like this can follow. We threaten checkmate, take, go back because there's nothing more to do on this diagonal. Now the black king has a lot of weak dark squares, and our dark squared bishop is really strong right now. The game can end something like this. We aim at the dark squares, come into h6. The knight blocks the vision of the bishop, so we bring our own knight to g5, and it's basically checkmate. Black needs to give away their queen or something else. This is just one for white. Now we go even further back. We come back to this position. If they block with f6, I advise you to go a3. Here bishop c5. We just take, and that's a fork. If they go bishop a5 here, we have e5. That's an interesting move. Seems like we sacrifice our knight, but we have this fork, and we cap the bishop in the corner. Knight f6, check, and if they block, that's really bad, they're already lost. We can take the knight, and if they take with the pawn back, that's mate in 2. Whew, that was a lot of theory for c takes b2 move. Knight g2 e7 runs into b takes c3, this is just a free pawn, because after bishop goes away to c5 or a5, we have knight to g5, castles, queen h5. Here h6, take. Now we have this mate square, they need to cover it somehow, it's just one. We're up in exchange and black king is almost getting mated. Bishop a5, the same thing. Here. If they go to the corner, we can even sucker a bishop because it's checkmate. So knight g7 is this move is kinda bad, but if knight develops to f6, we go e5, as we already know, knight g4, and here we have this tactic, bishop takes, and knight check. This covers an attack on this knight with the queen. So, but of course, if they go to g8, this is just mate in 2. But if they don't, and for example they go like king e8, we have takes, and don't forget about the discovered attack on your queen. That would be a really sad way to lose a game. That's it for knight g4. If knight e4, this is once again this fork, you can remember it. Castle takes, we've already seen something like this. And the worst thing here is this d5 move, and I don't really have anything that good for you, so we can go to an endgame with these traits. I'm not guaranteeing that exactly this will happen, but if you're lucky, you may get something like this, where you can trap the rook with the g4, but I just didn't want to leave you without anything. Forgive me for not being completely objective, but in the event of knight f6, we have a beautiful and mesmerizing opening. It's like the starry night of chess, and it comes after black taking the second pawn and us playing knight c3, the Scotch Gambit. And it looks so dumb and odd, like you willingly put your knight on the spot where it can be taken by a pawn, and it is even attacked more times than defended. But you'll trust me after I say this. DC, the most obvious move. And we have this check. We are familiar with it in the Scotch Gambit. And this queen fork, but we don't take right now. We utilize the rook pin, because we want our rook to also attack the enemy king. So, they will most likely cover. We take d6. And we're not going to cover like specific lines, this is too much theory for you. I just want you to introduce you to this. And the good thing about this opening is that it is actually quite simple. Your plan is to go with this rook to e4, bishop to g5, and the second rook, and you pile up on this e7 square near the enemy king, which I remind you cannot castle. So from this position, you already know we play bishop g5, if h6, trade, rook a1, all completely our plan. c6, we need to move our queen, go back, attack these two pawns. And in case of the rook g8, we can perhaps even have our queen join this battery, and this is completely crushing. The king is not escaping from here. Let's go back a few moves. Maybe our opponent plays like c takes b2. We have check, king f8, knight g5, utilizes the pin, threatens checkmate, g6, check, bishop covers, boom, just check with the knight, and that's a fork on the queen. You won a queen. This promotion square is protected by your rook. That's just a game. But what if they cover with the knight? For example, we attack the rook, they defend the rook, check, takes, checkmate. That's it. You see? This opening is banger! Okay. What if they don't waste a move on h6? What if they play like rook f8? We go bar plan, rook a1, rook f7, trade, knight g5 attacks the rook, it can't guard this knight anymore. Double attack. What do we do? Check, d7, takes, bam. Let's check, and you're taking this, and you're maybe taking this, and maybe there is a fork, and these pieces haven't developed, and their king is in the middle, and yours quite safe. This opening just wins. I think I have never lost with this opening. Ever. Okay, let's go back to move 10. C takes b2. Just take with the bishop. d6. Take the pawn. Rook j doesn't work, it's just covered by your queen, that's a free rook. King d7. Take the pawn. King is there. Their pieces are scared, they're running away to the corner of the board. Okay. Uh, that's it with the theory for pawn takes the knight. But what if knight takes? The biggest trap here, we can give the check with the rook, we can not give the check with the rook, comes after b takes c3, because the most logical move to take twice just basically loses the game instantly. Move 8. Knight g5, castles, queen h5. We've seen this a few times, but here the knight can be taken with the bishop. We take with the bishop and their queen is pretty trapped. However, they have this knight e7 idea, but first they play g6, queen h6, of course, because the dark square are weakened. Knight e7 blocks, and you can already notice this move. It's of course rook e7 to leave the spot for this bishop to go to f6. Because if we didn't take and just went here, there's maybe knight f5 and it blocks checkmate. You're winning the queen, but they can take your queen. It's complicated. The best move here was to go bishop g5, but that's unnecessary because we can just take the damned knight and that's just checkmate. But if the opponent is better at the game and they don't take the bait and don't take this pawn, and for example they castle, there's a lot of things we can do here, but I have found a really nice trap. It comes after knight takes d4, d5, we go to d3 with the bishop, bishop f6 threatens this knight here, we go bishop a3, attack the rook, rook goes e8, and we go queen h5, threatening to take the pawn with the queen, maybe a checkmate, g6 of course blocks, and we have this queen sacrifice on d5 for a pawn. and the balance of pawns is restored. But if they take the bait and take our queen, we have this mate in 3. Rook takes, check. King goes, wants to escape to h6, but bam, bishop f8 comes. And after king here, this is just a really pretty checkmate. That's it for now with the enactments and Gambit. You can study it on your own. There's a lot of things you can study there. What happens if they don't take the second pawn? And we can't play the enactments, and if they play bishop to c5, which is arguably even more popular. Here we come back to our principles. Knight is on f6, we go e5. Knight g4 is the most popular move. And here we can't take cd, so we first need to play c3. If dc, we've seen a similar position, but when the bishop was on b4. If you can remember, we go bishop takes f7, knight check, and if they go there, there's checkmate in 2, and if they don't go to g8, we can take the knight. If they don't take on c3 and for example castles, there's just cd, knight back, bishop g5 attacks the queen, queen e8, h3 attacks the knight, knight can come back to h6, but here it gets taken with the bishop, gh. And our simple plan is to go knight c3, knight d5, and knight f6 with this fork, if they allow it. d6, knight d5. Black notices the fork and goes queen d8, knight to f6. If king h8, we can go d3 and threaten checkmate. Black queen needs to take, and we wrap a queen. That's just completely winning. If here knight takes, then it's pretty simple as always. Takes, rook e1. We're winning a minor piece. d6, cd, bishop b4. Really bad because queen a4. That's a fork, and the knight still falls. It's game. That's it for knight g4. If knight e4, then we already know queen e2. If d5, we can take en passant. Bishop f5, just knight d2, and we pressure the pinned piece and win it. And the scary thing is the d5 move. As we know, the d5 move right here, d5. But in the other openings, it's scarier, because here we're actually in a really good shape to fight back. We take, they take. We take, they block. We have bishop g5 attacks the queen, f6, good move, check, king goes to f7, and we defend the pawn. If something like bishop g4 happens, this is a known thing. We can go knight check and take the bishop. And if they want to defend and attack, we just have this check, blocks, check, check, nice maneuver with the queen. And if they go somewhere like here, we have this skewer on the queen and the king, rook a e8. We don't carelessly take, we have something better. Queen takes g5, the queen is pinned, it can't take, so the king goes back, and that's checkmate. That's really nice. But that is against f6. Against, for example, queen d5. Yeah, not f6, but queen d5. We have knight c3 utilizing the pin. Queen can go here, knight to e4 because knight was under attack. And if rook takes, rook e1, they block the potential discovered check, knight h4. The queen is already lost, by the way, after queen d5. That is a really bad variation for black, because we have this check in the end, and it just picks up the queen. And queen d6, not d5 but d6, is also really bad. Just check, blocks, knight d2 now, still going for e4, knight e4, queen goes back, check, and this is discovered check on the king, we pick up the queen. The queen is often lost in these lines. You saw the lines, knight f6 is not a bad response for us either.
Full Metal Alchemist!
I'm really glad you've made it to the final chapter. Here we'll have some final words and some final lines. For example, this d6 move This is basically the transposition to some sort of a Philidor defense. If you don't know what a Philidor is, it's after e4, e5, knight f3, they can play this d6 move, kinda boring, blocks your bishop in. So what do I recommend to play in this position? Basically the same stuff that you play in the Philidor defense. Knight takes, if the knight takes we can take with the queen, bishop f4, and we castle long. We have ideas of pushing e4. We have a lot of control for the square. Basically the Philidor defense is nothing scary. You should be able to beat it pretty easily. Also, we should definitely talk about Scotch Gambit declined, although it's quite bad to decline this gambit. They can play also a d6 move. This is also some kind of a Philidor, but with knight c6, and it is pretty bad. Like, a lot of moves work here, but I think I found the best one. It's seemingly bad one, d takes e5, but it's actually pretty dangerous. Here we take the queen, and a lot of people take with the knight. They immediately lose this pawn. It's pretty bad, so they need to take with the queen. We go bishop e3 to not let our opponent develop his dark square bishop easily. Knight f6, knight c3 defends the pawn. They can develop the knight to b4, and we have long castle with check, bishop d7, and here this move knight d5. It seems like we blunder a pawn. If knight takes the pawn, we take the bishop and take this pawn, and this position is already pretty scary for black, because look at how many threats there actually are. Rook threatens to take the bishop with check. Knight threatens this fork. Rook threatens this fork. So it's really bad, and only one move saves black here, and it's not knight to d6, because we have bishop c5, which attacks this knight and attacks this knight. Although this knight is defended, it guards the f7 pawn, so if black saves this knight, trade and fork, so knight d6 does not work. What does work is knight to a2 check, because after king b1, knight check or that knight check, it doesn't matter, takes, they pick up the rook, and they're actually 1 point up, but we have 2 pieces against the rook and 2 pawns, and that's pretty actually good, because these 2 pieces are bishops. We have 2 bishops on a pretty open board. It's good. I believe that you can at least draw this position. If we go back here once again and knight takes another knight, this is mistake already, because pawn takes and we pick up a pawn. We are now up a pawn. We were threatening the fork, so king moved, and this position is pretty good for white. We were threatening a fork with our knight, and after king takes, this position is pretty good. And the last line of Scotch Gambit declined is this knight f6 move in this position. Here we just take, knight takes. In this position we can go bishop c4, which is a trappy line, because if they just develop their bishop, there's just a fork with the queen. That's pretty simple. We've seen it on a lot of other lines of the Scotch Gambit. Here this check and we pick up the knight. That's nice for white. And with that, that's a really big chunk of Scotch Gambit covered. I hope you liked it. I hope you like this opening. You don't need to remember all of the stuff I showed by heart. Scotch Gambit often plays itself. Just look for tactics, and the glory of victory will come to you. Subscribe.